There's a difference between a good entrepreneur and a great entrepreneur, between a good business person and a great business person. And it's the difference between a cook and a chef.
Because employees is their best asset.
Being human is also the, loyal to the family.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Swell, where we talk about real conversations with real leaders and no hype. Today, we have David Kristal, one of the most successful entrepreneurs in our community, who has founded an amazingly successful company called Augeo. He's a great leader, a great son, and a great citizen in our community. Let's get the Swell going. David, welcome to the show.
Now, I have to say, with that introduction, I'm done. Like, I'm out of here. It's only downhill from there. But no, it's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Thank you, David, for coming. I know David like 3-4 years now. He's a mentor to me, and he doesn't know sometimes because I'm following him. He's a very successful entrepreneur. He's a successful technologist. And one thing I love about him is he goes through lots of different cycles of technology, and he's always curious. He doesn't go get comfortable and say, hey, I built something and let's, stay there. And then maybe 5 more years it goes away, but, I can have my exit. I built one thing, but he's not like that. He's out there constantly building, and he's building in a kind way, and because kindness is very important to my heart. And also he's very involved in our ecosystem, startup ecosystem, helping lots of founders. Being David here is a dream come true. So thank you, David, for being here. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
I will start my first question. So you went to Stanford Law, you practiced, then in 1997, you joined your father at a restaurant chain that was losing money every month. Take us back to that decision. What made you walk into the fire like that?
And maybe I can even begin with some background. So I grew up in St. Paul, went to Sibley High School, which is in West St. Paul. Now it's, I think, called Two Rivers High School. Went to the University of Minnesota for undergraduate. And all through my early years, including college, I worked in the restaurant business. My dad, I always say, is a rags to better rags story, right? And he, like your son, went to Central High School, graduated, went to the University of Minnesota for just 6 months, and dropped out, went into the Navy. And when he came out of the Navy, didn't have money, but they met someone who lent them enough money to open up a restaurant. So they opened up a restaurant called Embers in 1956 on the corner of Lake Street and Hiawatha in Minneapolis, which has long since been gone. But they ended up to build a very successful Midwestern restaurant chain, family-style restaurant chain. So I had the extraordinary privilege of seeing 2 entrepreneurs, and my dad and his partner, build this extraordinary company, and then literally work in the restaurants, bussing, cooking, waiting tables. It was 24/7, for lack of a better characterization, greasy spoon operation. He'd roll over in his grave if I called it that, but that is the truth. And all through college. And then when I went off to law school, now to get to your question, I never anticipated coming back into the family business. I graduated law school, moved back to Minnesota, practiced law, loved the practice of law, left the practice for a number of different reasons, which included eventually joining one of our firm's largest clients outside of the practice of law. And then in the late 90s, the business was losing a lot of money. And that is the 1997 reference that you make. And my dad's like, well, you don't have to come back in, but, we could lose everything. And so what do? It was an easy decision because, in a world, at least in my world, family is first, and kindness is first, and joy is first. And what brings me the most joy? It's being in and around that part of me, which is core to who I am, which is at that time my father and my family, and that's what brought me back into the business. There's a whole story there, which we'll get into, but that's how I ended up to at least begin that leg of what is now this journey.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. Growing up in an entrepreneurial family, and when several things you mentioned. My love to St. Paul. I'm in this country 26 years. And, right now I live in St. Paul, and people knows. And, the first time I felt like I'm home in St. Paul. And so that's the reason my children goes to St. Paul schools, and I'm very happy where I am. So, and that's another reason, like, I'm always like, when a David conversation comes, and I'll say, yeah, David is like, loves St. Paul like I do. And also one other thing is it's very important to me is the family. And Shailesh knows that, like, as Ride the Next Wave, all the companies that I engage with, first principle is always human. And so that's, that's the core principle. I mean, we go to that all the time. But being human is also the, loyal to the family. And so that's important to us. And, in our company, we always tell people, like, if a family issue, if you ask permission for family, I mean, you are losing time. Just go be with your family. So that's important for us. Again, thank you very much for, reminding, being kind and family oriented are, important things in this world. So.
I want to, and I've been married for 31 years, 2 daughters. We're very close as a family. It's just, knock on wood, I feel very, very blessed. To accentuate St. Paul. Back in 1997, Ember's Restaurant's headquarters was in the Central Corridor, sort of on the, the University Avenue in St. Paul, which connects sort of downtown St. Paul to Minneapolis. And when we moved offices, I told my dad, who was alive at the time, we need to stay in St. Paul. These are the roots of the organization. So all these years later, we're still 1 block in St. Paul. That's where our headquarters are, near 280 University. Although we have offices now all over the place and we have a global business, but we're still headquartered in St. Paul.
And that's amazing. Also, one other thing is sometimes, like when I talk about Augeo and David, I tell people, like, I mean, lots of people doesn't maybe know David. I mean, he built an amazingly big business, and he's I think the revenue is like $500 million. I mean, it's a big business, but I mean, they sit in a technically an industrial area on Highway 280. I mean, there's no arrogance. It's like, hey, we are doing our thing and in a good way, and we are building things in a quiet way, but we are profitable, we are growing, and I mean, that's the humility that I believe lots of founders needs to, ingrain.
David, you're a Stanford Law graduate. You practiced, but at some point, you joined your father, right, to run the father's business, and you actually talked about that earlier. Take us back to that moment where you could have had such an amazing, successful career as a lawyer, right, coming out of Stanford. Take us back to that moment, like you making that decision to join father, be part of the family.
Yeah, I mean, I think the decision in the end, while I wrestled with it a little bit, was a relatively easy decision because it was family, right? And so the decision to jump in and begin to figure this out, I had just gotten married, we didn't have kids. So I was at a point in my personal life where taking risk, whatever that might look like, and whether I was doing it intentionally or just out of like the right thing to do, seemed like the right decision at the time. And then as we started to move into, okay, what are we taking on here? We had about 3,000 employees across the upper Midwest. We were losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. At one point, well over $600,000 a month. And we did the very best we could to, cut our expense base and find ways to drive revenue up. But at the end of the day, when you think about the family sector, this would be like the Perkins, Denny, et cetera, et cetera. But, at one point, the family sector had the dinner day part, had the lunch day part, and really owned the breakfast day part. And what happened in the 80s with the TGI Fridays and other sorts of casual themed restaurants, the dinner day part went away as people wanted to sort of have drinks and have dinner and watch sports, whatever it might be. The lunch day part went to QSR, the fast fooders, over into the 90s. And then by the late 90s, the breakfast day part was going to the Starbucks, the bagel places, the coffee shops. And so the mega trends were moving away from that sector. We nevertheless really tried our very best to figure out how to compete in that sector. And we were able to lift our revenue by north of 20%. I think you may know my dad and I were actually making our own TV commercials, not because we wanted to, he wanted to, but I'm more low profile from that standpoint. But it was the most economical way to do it, meaning we could shoot 3 commercials in one day. And I can see Caroline, the producer, probably throwing up saying, wait a second, we need to make more money as we do what we do. But at the end of the day, all of our production did well. We shot a lot of spots. We just shot more spots and made it more efficient. And we're able then to authenticate the quality and value of our food as we were making promises to, the audiences here in the upper Midwest, people would come in and they would actually see us deliver on that. We still couldn't buck the mega trend, which was moving away from the family sector in general. So that was sort of the beginning of it. And there were a number of lessons that came from that really stand true today. And one of which is, there's some really brilliant people that drive innovation. I would say I'm not one of them. but what I did learn is crisis drives innovation. When you don't have a choice, right? You are forced to think differently, wildly, imaginatively. And so crisis really is critical to innovation. But culture sits at the core of all of this, which I'm sure we'll get into.
It's spot on, right? Crisis is the mother of innovation, is how we call it. What did people around you think of the decision of you going into the family business? Your friends, your potentially colleagues from Stanford?
I don't know. I think it's a great question. I think people certainly respect the decision to go back in and try to help the family business, right? Relative to my colleagues or friends from Stanford, there's some of my closest friends to this day. In fact, my business partner, Juan Sabater, who co-chairs Augeo with me, was a classmate of mine at Stanford. He's based in New York, but I think generally very supported, but not talked about a lot, actually. It was a while ago too, it turns out.
I mean, I'm a big believer of constraint. And I mean, I talk about this especially for early stage founders and stay. I said, constraints are good for you because it makes you more creative. One of my jokes is always the biggest constraint in a business is profitability. And most to-be founders or founders raise lots of money always misses the point. To me, it's like a business becomes business when it's profitable. So after going all those crisis moments and stuff, and one other thing is also in me is sometimes people doesn't want to move. And I tell people like, hey, don't stuck in the, decks or the strategy papers. Go start hitting the life. It means that start doing something, because when you hit your life hits back. It gives you, feedback. And at one point, it can show you something that you never think about. And that can be where the traction can happen. That's where you can say, hey, I was thinking all these things 3 years, but in year 4, somebody called me and said, hey, I have this problem. You are there, but, can you help me? And if you help and it works, maybe it will open you a new door. And I think there's a story here with, like when you are trying to save the embers and stuff, and one of your service clients, like loyalty. And so at one point you get a, signal that maybe there's a different business here. So can you tell us that story?
Sure. So let me begin, I guess, with the importance of changing mindset. So with Embers, while I went back into the business in 1997, the fact is the company hadn't built a new restaurant for at least the 10 years before that. So the mindset of these, roughly 3,000 employees and leadership were, let's just sort of maintain the status quo. If people, if we're doing a $4.99 steak and eggs on a weekend morning, which is a discounted breakfast, and someone comes in and wants it for $3.99 or tries to take advantage of us, we've got used to saying no to customers. And we had to change the mindset of, no, actually the customer's always right. And you may not believe this, but as far as I know, it's true. Embers in 1956 was the first to put bacon and cheese on a hamburger, right? So stay with me on that. Okay, so we've got that fact, right? And I used to go from, and then back in the mid 90s, there was a book called The Nordstrom Way that talked about extraordinary customer service. And there's a story in that book of a customer returning a tire at Nordstrom, and they had to, we've heard this story, right? Mm-hmm. So I used to go from restaurant to restaurant and tell this story that a customer you're standing behind the counter of an Embers. Customer comes in with a car tire. And on top of that car, it slams a car tire down on the counter in front of you. And on top of that car tire is a piece of cheese. That customer looks at you and says, I ordered bacon on top of my piece of cheese, on top of my car tire. Where's my bacon? The only thing that should come to mind in your world is, where can I find a piece of bacon big enough to put on top of that piece of cheese, on top of that car tire? Because in our world, every single customer needs to be treated like our only customer. And without that one customer, we're out of business, right? So we begin with a mind, and that expression, as outlandish as it sounds, begins to change mindset, right? And so the first thing we had to do before you change anything, before you actually choose a new strategy, is mindset. Second thing is to understand your ingredients, right? So I'm using food, right? So one of my favorite expressions is there's a difference between a good entrepreneur and a great entrepreneur, between a good business person and a great business person. And it's the difference between a cook and a chef. The difference between a cook and a chef. And we all have ingredients in our cupboard, right? We open up that cupboard and a cook has a recipe and prepares something very delicious tied to wherever that recipe is. But a chef doesn't always have a recipe. In fact, as entrepreneurs, we seldom have recipes, right? We have to keep our cupboards filled with ingredients. That means we're constantly learning. The only way we keep it filled with ingredients is to know more, to learn more, to experience more, to understand what it means to not be me and understand what it means to be like other people, understand their knowledge. The more our cupboard is filled with ingredients, the more creative we can be as chefs. So now coming back to Embers, back in those days, we're like, okay, the mega trend is moving away from us, meaning family restaurants are having a harder and harder time competing. What are the ingredients? What are the assets we have? Among those assets were relationships. We had great relationships with food service distributors, with vendors like Pepsi, Coca-Cola, and others. So we reached out to those partners and said, what could we do together that's quote unquote in addition to our restaurant business? And our very first client, and we launched a company called Foodstreet, which was intended to help independent restaurants more effectively compete by bringing them better services on all the different things that they use in their day-to-day operations, from linen services to trash hauling services to payroll processing services. And that became our very first sort of program. And our very first client was one of the largest food distributors in the US today, which is still a client after all these years. And that's how we pivoted to, we kept our core business, of course, but we moved in a new direction when we saw the writing on the wall that the trending was going to be such that we weren't going to really be able to accelerate growth in the core of the family sector because no one was anywhere really in the United States at that point in time, other than potentially in the northeastern corridor. Sort of the Greek restaurants, the Greek diners were doing very well at that time, but that's how it started anyway. Yeah.
Take us back to the moment where, how did loyalty kind of as a potential idea came to your mind?
It really evolved, right? So as we had this idea to help independent restaurants more effectively compete, we're thinking, well, how do we scale this? And if we have to go from restaurant to sell it, it was going to take a long time. So that's why we approached a distributor who had restaurant relationships as customers with all these independent restaurants. And so we partnered, and that's really how it all began. And it was a little less about loyalty and more about sort of good intention to help independent restaurants more effectively compete. And these were the sort of the early days. We think about neighborhood restaurants in the 1990s. And in those days, St. Paul was one of the foremost neighborhood restaurant communities, chef-driven neighborhood restaurants in the US. Now, of course, they're everywhere. But it started, just with the intention to better enable independent restaurants or, regional restaurant groups. So that's how it all started. And then it grew into more relationships that way. And then eventually we had an opportunity. So the name of the company was Foodstreet, but we had other organizations, large enterprises starting to reach out to us. Do you think you could do something like that for us? And we'd show up at I can't name brands because you want to protect our client base. We have, I think today, and we'll talk about what we are today, but of the Fortune 500 companies in the United States, I think 100 of them roughly are clients, in addition to others. So, but in those days, there was a very large company enterprise in home improvement. You can imagine there's only a few of them today that reached out, and we didn't want to go to that meeting with the name Foodstreet. So we had to come up with another name. All the names were taken. So we ended up I went to law school. Augeo is Latin for augment. We augment relationships between distinctive companies and their customers. And our name is always behind the mask of the brands that we have the privilege of representing. But that's really how it began to grow. And then when we won that big account, people were like, well, who's this company out of St. Paul? And then it all started to flow. And then around that time, as I referenced, my business partner, my great friend, now business partner Juan, was on. He had rose the ranks at Goldman Sachs, and he's like, dude, I need to make a life change. I have 3 daughters, very family oriented, like me, and so we spent some time and ultimately decided, well, let's start working together. We to this day have separate paths, different careers, but we partner together on a lot of different things. So it was just and then because he has such he had such amazing background, world-class caliber background in M&A. We started to do some very creative sort of acquisitions of challenged companies. And while the core of our growth is organic growth, we began sort of to find ways to accelerate scale through a lot of different creative strategies.
That's an incredible story.
I'm curious now. At which point you made the hard decision about the embers? I mean, how did you do that? Is your father there? And I mean, did you make a decision? Say, hey, this is totally Foodstreet is going crazy good, and Embers is losing money. So at what point did you make the decision? Say, hey, let's close. I mean, that's a tough one, and especially from your father point of view. I mean, from one thing I know, and you're an entrepreneur, like our businesses are our babies. So it's not only it's a financial decision, but also it's a very emotional decision. So how did that work?
So that's a great question. One of the things that I've learned over the years as an entrepreneur is you have to be entirely unbiased, like totally objective, brutally honest with yourself as you look in the mirror, right? And so as we were looking at the family segment, we had employees that had been with us for a lot of years. We saw the writing out. We didn't know this going in. In 1997, we did not know this, right? But as the years went on, we were like, we're not going to be able to save it as is. And my dad, because he is heart first, head second, would have spent every last penny trying to save his baby because he cares so much about the community, the culture, the people. And he was right to care about that. But at the end of the day, if you can't save it as is, you have to shift it. So even while we were trying to find alternative revenue streams, which is the story of how Augeo started, right? Foodstreet and then Augeo, we thought, what do we do with the core business? And the fact is, what was working and is still working to this day is when those restaurants, family-style restaurants, are in the hands of individual owners who show up every day and take great care of that single customer, much less their whole customer base, they are successful. So we began a process to quote unquote refranchise those locations, meaning selling them off or literally giving them to our managers or others who would want to buy them to run them as independent operations. And so that's what we did. We moved through a multiple year process of refranchising or selling off the locations to either fund the debt that we had or have them operate independently as restaurants. And I think it was only 3 or 4 years ago that the last Embers in Brooklyn Center actually closed. So it's been quite a journey, but it really did work from the standpoint of enabling and ultimately empowering individual ownership and entrepreneurship for people who otherwise might not have that opportunity to own their own operation. And mostly it worked. It didn't work in every situation, but in most situations it did, meaning every operation.
I have one more question. I mean, the thing is that, you are here because you are our guest, but I want to appreciate your dad too. I mean, if I tell you, introduce your dad for a minute, and how do you introduce your dad?
Well, you referenced kindness. There isn't anyone, I don't think there's a single person I've ever met that wouldn't say he's one of the kindest people that they've ever met. He's filled with heart. He's filled with commitment. He's filled with objectivity. He's just full of love. He passed suddenly in 2007. He ended up to raise us. My parents divorced and they separated between 3rd and 4th grade. And so my dad and my stepmom raised us, even though I'm very close to this day with my mom. He fundamentally believed in the notion that you have to believe that you will be successful. He gave me, that I have to this day, a poem from an unknown author on a little piece of parchment paper that I would carry with me through this old dictionary that I took all the way through law school. I'd open it up and there it was. It's now framed in my office. And it goes something like this. And it's not, I didn't know I was going to get to this day, but it's not gender neutral. So it's because it's an old poem. But if you think you're beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you won't. If you like to win, but you think you can't, it's almost a cinch you won't. For out of the world you find success begins with a fellow's will. It's all in the state of mind. Full many a race is lost ere ever a step is run. Many a coward fails ere ever his work's begun. Think big and your deeds will grow. Think small and you'll fall behind. Think that you can and you will. It's all in the state of mind. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but sooner or later the man who wins is the fellow who thinks he can.
That's incredible that you talked that whole thing in one single
Entrepreneurship.
You know,
That's
I carry it
amazing.
with me wherever I go.
That's amazing. And we are talking about startups and stuff. And I think we should share that poem with anyone who comes to me from now. And I mean, that's the gist of it. So thank you very much for introducing your dad, man. I really
Thank you for
appreciate it.
asking that question.
I mean, we owe lots of things to our dads and moms. And so I just want to say that, family is very important. And so are you watching this episode? Just, if your dad is there, call them, say thank you. If your mom is there, call them, thank you, because they, raise us. So
Let's pivot to Augeo. Augeo has been a successful organization. You built it from ground up with your partner. Talk us through the journey of early years of Augeo and the last few decades, right, of technology evolution, and how Augeo has pivoted and picked up on those, leveraged those innovations in technology, whether it was web or internet or mobile or cloud today. Just tell us that.
There's a lot.
I know there's a lot, but just tell us that.
So I
the
will say,
evolution.
let's talk about the essence of Augeo, and it's a culture, right? I mean, and it's, people talk about their culture in many different ways. The way that I like to express it is we have an earnest and consequential culture. Earnest in that it's a special way to care. It's a special sort of intensity behind culture, right? And then consequential, meaning there's consequences. It needs to be outcome driven. We can't just show up and hug each other every day, which is great, but it needs to be earnest and it needs to be consequential and based in the shared mindset, truly, that whatever got us to where we are today is not going to get us to next. And what I mean by that, so in other words, whatever got us to where we are today is not going to get us to next. And what I mean by that is no matter the technology, no matter the uncertainty in the world, no matter the politics and the war, the awful wars in Ukraine or the Middle East or whatever it might be, there's always going to be uncertainty. There's going to be changing technology. There's going to, from AI to tokenization to, crypto, to, you just back it up to 2007 when the iPhone was launched and sort of changed everything. All of that needs to be normalized into culture embedded in this mindset that, again, we don't ever accept where we are now. We're always working for next. So if it's technology that's changing, if it's world politics that's changing, it's this notion that uncertainty becomes a norm, right? And it's that drives us forward more than any sort of one sort of trend, mega trend, minor trend, whatever it might be. It's this notion that we have to expect uncertainty, we have to embrace it, and we have to lean into it, and whatever that means at that moment in time. And then we think about the swell, this is a swell podcast, by the way, but we think about the swell from a wave standpoint. The one thing that is probably the best, maybe, the one area where I perhaps have learned the most over all these 25-ish years of what is today Augeo is an ability to have an intuition and a judgment more about things that won't work than things that will work. It's really hard to figure out what's going to work. It's not as hard for me as it once was to get out in front of things that won't work, right? And so that manifests in a few different ways. The first is that when there's a time when you have to be riding that wave, because that's where the market's headed, right? We're on that wave. We have to be out in front of that wave, but we have to be on that wave. There are times like right now with AI, the wave is coming, man. It is coming. I'm sure we'll talk about AI specifically in a moment. We have to actually be on that surfboard, waiting for the wave to come and leading in our sector. Leading in our sector. And that is by far the riskiest when you're a first mover, and by far the most expensive. But if you're not, when at the pace of change right now and the pace of innovation, if you're not a first mover, you will get left behind. And probably for the first time in my career, I've never felt it like we do right now. And then there are times when we literally want to be on the other side. After the waves has crashed, then we're going to jump in, right? And so so when we think about riding the wave, because I was thinking about this last night as I was reading some background on what you guys are building, there are different different entry points for the wave, right? And it sort of depends on how you're managing into this world of uncertainty and what some have called sort of pro-anthropic leadership. And actually, Juan, my business, is also co-president of a private equity firm called Valor, and they talk a lot about pro-anthropic leadership, and I've been listening carefully to how they talk about it because there's some incredibly valuable lessons.
We, want to tell a little story around ride the next wave, right? And you talked about there have been so many waves, right, over the period of the last 30 plus years. I'm trying to capture the essence of what you said. People who lean in and they are actually in front of it, leverage the part of the wave which actually pushes you forward, right? Those are the people who win. I mean, that's what we do at Ride the Next Wave. And that is why the name of the company is Ride the Next Wave, because we really help our clients to stay ahead of the game. And so I just wanted to share that perspective of how the name actually came about. And as you said, there have been so many waves. When you look back, and by the way, we want to know about Augeo. Our viewers want to know, in your words, what Augeo does and how it's really helping organizations and their employees and people. Maybe let's talk about that. And then the second part of the question is, we have so many waves. Do you feel like there is a wave you missed as you look at the last 30 years? So two-part question.
I would say yes or hell yes. Yeah. I mean, like, there's when you move at the pace that we move, back in the Embers days, or Motorola had this saying, we celebrate noble failure. And what that means is, like, you need to be taking risk all day long. You need to figure out how to manage that risk. But we move at the speed of light. And that's why culture is so important, because if you have the right culture, you learn. People talk about fail fast, stumble fast. Better to stumble than fail, right? So you stumble fast. And if you're making decisions, I mean, right now, I don't care what anyone says, and maybe you guys will want to edit this out of the podcast. No one really knows for certain what AI means. When you think about how we were thinking about AI in our business a year ago versus where we are now, it's extraordinary how we have evolved and unpredictable at the time of a year ago. So therefore, if we're going to be successful in this new era, this new leg of our journey as a race, as a human race, literally, much less in our sectors that we serve or the businesses that we run, we need to learn how to stumble, how to take risk, how to identify, as I said, and my intuition is, okay, is this going to scale? Is this going to work or not work? And if it's not, we got to try the next thing. And we have to build a culture that can operationalize that way of thinking and then embrace it and build on it. So when we look back on the decisions we've made in the past, and we've missed some swells, we've missed some waves, 100%. At the same time, we don't, like the ultimate blessing for me is I wake up in the morning to this day, literally, and feel like I'm just getting started. That's what makes this so fun for me. And so even though you look back and say, well, we could have done that differently, who doesn't Monday morning quarterback, right? You do that because you learn from it, but man, you cannot, you just got to move past it, because we've had an extraordinary run as Jihan, you've said, like, we're roughly a $500 million business, and we'd be much larger had we not sold two businesses. We've had two significant exits, one of which was in 2018 to a big New York private equity firm, that business is growing like mad. I'm still on the board of that business. And then we sold an even larger opportunity 3 years ago to JP Morgan. Who sells a business to JP Morgan, right? I mean, it speaks volumes for the caliber and quality of our team, of our technology, of how we think about things. And so so we'd be even a larger business today had we not done that. And yet here we are, and we couldn't be more excited about what the future means for us. Relative to AI, I will say this, like 6, 7, 8 months ago, I wasn't sure whether we were even going to survive. As enthusiastic as I am, as confident as I am in our team, our talent, our technology, our culture, how we think about things, it is such an uncertain time because of AI. At least 6 months ago, I wasn't sure what it was all going to mean, because back then, and still to a degree this day, every time Claude or Anthropic would they'd come out with something new that would literally reshape a sector, right? And that's still to a degree happening. Now we've invested so much, we've learned so much. We're roughly a 500-person organization today. We've learned so much, and we're developing the right skills individually. We're developing the right skills functionally. We're now doing it at the application layer, which is sort of above the foundational model layer. So we're starting to bring things out into market that as we socialize them are resonating as sort of breakthrough ideas and thinking. Now we're feeling a lot more confident. Doesn't mean for a second we have succeeded. I have a lot of expressions. One of my other favorite expressions is the downfall of a magician is the belief in his or her own magic. There ain't no magic to this, man. It's all humility, Jihan, as you've said, and we have to show up every single day, roll up our sleeves and get to work, right? And that's what we've been doing in the world of AI. We've done all kinds of things organizationally. We've set up cross-functional teams. We've embraced all the models. We're about to announce something that no one in our sector anywhere in the world has announced yet, which is we've signed a deal to partner with one of the leading foundational models. So like everyone else, we're using Claude, we're using Grok, we're using ChatGPT and others, right? But when you have an ability to literally work side by side with some of the best engineers in the world, as you learn, for us, we're thinking about the world of engagement, like enterprise engagement. These are, employee recognition solutions, customer loyalty solutions, vendor platforms, creator communities, right? Built around customers of enterprises or employees of enterprises. Think about influencing organically. What's the most authentic form of voice? It's an employer or customer saying, I love this brand and I want to share it out into my own social channels, right? That's our core business today. And as we then accelerate and reimagine that business in a world of AI, to be able to work side by side with the best engineers in the world to learn how to optimize against these models is an extraordinary blessing. And so we've been, in addition to doing what a lot of our competitors are doing, we've been working overtime to build a relationship to have that opportunity. We're still model agnostic, meaning we don't have to be embedded with we don't have to do anything with Claude or with Grok or ChatGPT, whatever it might be, but we're learning from the very best. And so you'll see this announcement coming in a couple of weeks.
I love how you are embracing AI, right, across the stack as well as across the organization, right? But with every change, there is a change management under it. Right? There are some people who are going to embrace it, and there are some people who are going to push back on it, right? Talk to our viewers about what that change management in your organization, where you are asking everyone to embrace the AI, leverage it to the best of the capabilities to get closer to your customers and their employees, improve the operations of the organization, make it better. Talk through that change management.
So I think there's a few things. It's a great question. There's a few things. The first is that if you were to look at software development methodology, and you guys understand this better than I do, but I've learned a lot over the last 30 years as now a tech entrepreneur, for better or for worse. So from a software development methodology standpoint, it is just fundamentally different today than it was a year ago. It's like changing in real time, right? How we do requirements documentations, how we build products, how we design products, how we engineer products is changing in real time. So fundamentally, whether we like AI or not, we have to embrace this time, right? And so therefore, I'm going to say this, I just am what I am, which is just direct, right? We have built a great company and a great culture over a lot of years. And when you build great cultures, they're not always in balance and they're not always great, right? You move through iterations, you move through cycles. You see things happen that you don't see coming with people, with teams, with functions, with the environment. Like you build a business in a particular sector. Today we have 5 different businesses. Sometimes those businesses succeed, sometimes they don't. And for reasons that you can influence, sometimes for reasons you can't influence. So culture ebbs and flows through all of that uncertainty and through all of that unpredictability. And so that's the first part. Second part is you actually have to then look at, okay, what is going to stick? And right now, no matter how you cut it, AI relative to engineering, product, all functions, finance, et cetera, it's changing everything, right? And what we don't yet know, but we know is going to change, is at the application layer. Meaning, so we look at it at the operating layer, at the functional layer, but at the application layer, like, how are we all going to use it? Well, we know of the use cases, from engineering to how we do our research to how we all engage with it. But the fact is, it's going to change applications too. And in the application layer, meaning the stuff we build for our clients and their constituents, their employees, their customers, their vendors, it's early days. We don't know, right? But the one thing we're telling our teams is you have to embrace this time, right? It's not a choice. The way that I would put it, and now back to culture, we've always tried to inspire people. We want you to do this. We want to convince you to do it. We want you to embrace it because we want you to feel good about it. Well, for probably the first time in our history, that's what I would call sort of a carrot approach, right? It's a carrot and a stick time, meaning we're telling our teams, we want you to embrace it. We're giving you the tools. We're telling you why. We're all inspired together. The carrot is leading the way for sure, but there's a stick element, and that is, look, I don't care if it takes you a day to learn it or a year to learn it. You better be all in. And if you're not all in, you're probably not going to make it in the future of Augeo. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, that is the stick approach. And so there are people, not in Augeo, just in general, that either don't believe in AI, don't like the pace of change, believe there's a lot of risk, and they're right. But relative to what we're trying to build as a company, we simply have to embrace these tools as they are, figure out how to do what we're doing with integrity, with good intention, and then bring them to life. Because if not, we will get left behind. We've always said that, like, during times of massive transformation, the status quo fundamentally gets remade. We need to be a part of that next world order. And if not, we will get left behind. It's just that simple. And so we are pressing very hard to teach people individually in their function, to learn together. We're formalizing a lot of different things. We still have a lot of informal learning happening. But at the end of the day, it's like that cook and the chef, man. We have to fill our cupboards up with more and more ingredients around AI. And the more we know, the more knowledge we have, the more we can share it, the more our collective cupboards are filled with ingredients, which means the more creativity we can bring, the more innovation we can bring, and the more pace we bring.
Best adoption of AI I've ever heard, right? And you are leading from the top, but at the same time, you are empowering the people in the middle so they can lead up and they can lead down. That's an incredible cultural story. Thank you, David, for sharing.
And I think the reason that I now am less worried than I was a few months ago is because we're learning. Like, there's a growing momentum and confidence among our teams that, oh my God, we're going to figure this out. And then if you want to, there's two primary architectures that we're building. The first is when you look at, is this okay? If you want to go into.
No, this is what it is.
There's two primary architectures. So our business today, we do employee recognition, employee culture, employee connection, and we're one of the top 2 or 3 in the world today, literally. In fact, Everest just came out with a report that put us in the very, very top tier of the best companies in the world. And we have the privilege of representing some of the biggest brands, names you've heard of. Biggest brands in the world, and their employees across the globe. I think we're in 180 countries, very active in roughly, call it 60 of those countries today. We have customer loyalty programs. Think of earning points and redeeming points, and retail programs, bank card programs, whatever it might be. We do a lot of that. We have a big platform in we call creator communities. So think of large brands who want their employees to be advocates for them, be influencers for them organically, customers being influenced for them, fans being influencers for them. Historically, there's a lot of paid influencing, but this is organic. This is where an employee might be you might be an employee of a big retailer. You can imagine some of the brands we have the privilege of working with, and you just push out, like, I love my company. This is what I did today. I'd love for you to come into our local store. You're doing promotion for them, but you're doing it from your heart, right? Because that's what we call brand advocacy. And we have a very large business team based up in Rochester, New York, that's growing that business like mad. And we're one of the foremost sort of companies now in the world that does, employee and customer influencing. And we also do a lot more in sort of social media and social activation in general. Then we have a large business that does experiential marketing. Think of live meetings and events all over the globe, very small, intimate, like board meeting type events to very, very large, big production events for some of the biggest brands in the world. And so in each of those instances, we're bringing a reimagined solution out. And there's sort of two primary architectures we're building. When you think about the loyalty space or even employee recognition, where employees are earning rewards that they can redeem across the globe, right? In any given year, it's roughly a $300 billion market of points. That, think of your airline miles that get redeemed, you earn and redeem points on your credit card, that gets redeemed. It's a $300 billion market. So that is a market of commerce, right? It's the form of currency or loyalty points, loyalty rewards, but it's people just coming in somewhere to a website and redeeming, right? Spending that currency. So when you think about shopping on Gemini right now or shopping in ChatGPT, there's a whole conversation happening. And the more that we know you, not in a creepy data way, like a permission way, the more that we can shape that conversation around what you might be interested in shopping for. So we're building the world's first 100% personalized shopping experience in the world of loyalty, redemption experience, right? That actually will be testing in 2 weeks. So we've been spending months on building out this capability. So one mega architecture we're building is a personalized shopping or commerce platform, all AI driven. And then when we are able to use sort of the sentiment analysis and the other features that AI can bring, I mean, think of having 100 million active consumers redeeming. How can you fully personalize? I mean, we've been talking about personalization for decades, right? But AI enables personalization in ways that's never been done before, right? And so think of having 100 million active users. We don't yet, by the way, we will. Think of having 100 million active users where every single day it's fully personalized for each one of those 100 million. That's what's possible with AI that's never been possible before. That's one architecture. The other architecture we're building is also in process, and that is harder, but that is like when you think about recognizing someone or saying thank you or making connections within an organization, you have to sort of be in the workflows. You have to be in the Jira workflow, in the Teams workflow, in their CRM systems, right? In their HRIS system, which is their HR systems. The more that we're able, not in a creepy data way, because this is all data owned by the enterprise, not by Augeo, not by us, right? But the more we're able to understand in real time, sort of quote unquote, in the moment intelligence, the more we're able to understand what's happening across an organization, the more we're able to enable that organization to achieve their goals, right? And so we're building out a separate architecture that puts us in the workflows relative to the world that we understand, which is engagement, which is, loyalty, which is productivity and performance. And so that's the other workflow we're building. And those two architectures sit at the core of what we're doing. We call it THEO. THEO is an acronym. It's Trusted Human Engagement Orchestration. So we have THEO for experience, THEO for rewards, THEO for analytics, THEO. So all of this is AI sort of driven. And so we're really reimagining. You'll see later this summer or early fall, we're relaunching our entire company as a startup, even though we're in the hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue with this idea. So I have never been more intellectually inspired in my career than I am right now. And again, this goes to this idea that I wake up every day and I feel like we're just getting started. And then we've surrounded ourselves. I'm blessed. Like I am just part of a team. Those really brilliant engineers and product folks are not me. We have an extraordinary team. This can only be done because of the commitment of a team, the talent of a team, and all that they bring. And it's really fun because we're building an amazing team of very special people.
That's amazing when work is fun. Right.
Well, here's another expression, right? Another favorite expression around this notion of work and fun. It's a Winston Churchill expression. There's two kinds of persons in this world. For the first kind of person, work is work and fun is fun. And for the second kind of person, work is fun. And those are Fortune's favorite children.
Yes, that is amazing. And those two architectures you talked about, and this is for our viewers, right? I mean, this is talk about leveraging AI with an AI first mindset and fundamentally rethinking your business model. That is what I think is the promise of AI, right? For organizations to really, organizations who are still thinking about, should I do it? Should I not do it? Should we completely embrace it? What is it going to do? Is there a way where we're going to fail? No, it is here to stay. And if you ride this wave, you are going to come on the other side extremely successful with not only a successful business, but amazingly satisfied customers for your brand. So love your approach and the two architectures.
I mean, I like to have some reflections here. I'm loving, what David is saying. I mean, I'm in this ecosystem so long, and there are several words that I don't like disrupt, transform, because everybody uses them, overuse them. My thing is in my life is if I do something myself and then put it out there, it's honest. And that's I believe. So I see so many people in my life. They were like, "Hey, we'll disrupt this, disrupt that." They will disrupt other people. I always tell people like, disrupt your organization first, or disrupt something, or put out there somewhere instead of talking about it. Now you are coming and saying to me, "Hey, I have a $500 million firm. I built this. Now we are again acting like a startup. We will debut out of it a new Augeo." That's a disruption. You bring in, and I think if you do it in your organization, I believe you have the honesty and authenticity to go and say, now I will disrupt the industry. That's the level of intellectual honesty that I love. And because, like I said, everybody's talking too much, and I'm becoming more cynical about this. I said, I really don't like to engage with talkers. Like, I am a builder, and I like to build things. And that's what, that's the reason, like, we are doing this. When we first talk about this podcast, I said, I don't care even one person shows up, watch it. This is, to me, is bringing good people, have a 2-hour conversation. If nothing happens, if nobody shows up to the party, I'm a better human being today because of David and because of my wonderful partner, Shailesh, and our amazing producer, Carolyn. And so that's beautiful. I will ask, because Shailesh mainly takes the technical questions, and I go for culture questions and the kindness questions. One thing is you mention your culture, and so to me is the culture needs to be very simple so everybody understands it. That's the reason we talk about 4 things in our culture, like always human, always curious, always fearless, and always transparent. And then what you mention is we hit there with curiosity. And because to me, it's curious is because I really don't like MBA mumbo jumbo, like a learning organization and all that bullshit. And
I'm totally with you.
yeah, I'm believing, are you curious? And because curious is opens doors. And when we are in a meeting with team, people, if I say, hey, let's don't do it that way, if somebody jumps and say, aren't we curious? And then you immediately say, oh, I become accountable very quickly. And that's curiosity opens doors because, like you mentioned at the beginning, as an entrepreneur, as a chef versus the cook, isn't it? And, we need to fill that cupboard with new learning, new language, everything that we can, makes us uncomfortable. That's the beautiful part of it. So I'm like, I'm very excited about where this conversation goes and on the fearless part of it. And sometimes when I talk about the fearless part, some people think that like I am this crazy entrepreneur trying to take risks. I tell people it's not about the risk. It's about psychological safety. And, I'm a kind of a guy, I make mistakes all the time because, I like to do things. And that's the reason I tell people, like, joke about it. I said, I never call myself a visionary because if I envision something, I want to start working on it at 6 a.m. in the morning. And that's what I want other people to do in my organization. I say, hey, do something. And then, like if you stumble on something, come and talk to us. If you fail, it's good. At least we learn something. But the thing is that fearlessness, makes the organization lively. And that's what I love about it. Like think about yesterday I met a good friend of mine. We talked about biomimicry, how you look at the, life and the nature and then get something out of it. If you think about humans, we say, hey, if you are curious, if you are learning, if you are fearless, you are a lively human being. My question is, why don't we do it to our cultures? Why don't we create organizations that lively because they are curious and they are fearless? And I'm glad you are confirming that. And because, at the end of the day, some of the times we make assumptions, but then you look at the successful people like David, and then if it works in his organizations, and then this will work for everyone. So my point is, I talk too much. Success recipe is not a secret thing, sits in, at the top of Himalayas. I mean, it's written everywhere. And so just listen, David, listen this conversation. I think you will get the recipe. Only thing you need to be curious and fearless to do something about it.
So just a comment on that, a few things. And I even want to actually come back to our culture right now, but philosophically, there's a couple of things that, we firmly believe in. And actually, before I even do that, I agree with you relative to the however you articulated the business school bullshit, even though I have an undergraduate business degree. And that is that anything we do internally needs to be able to be expressed internally, like externally, I should say. Anything we do internally needs to be expressed externally. So like, for example, our mission statement right now is something we need to be able to embrace internally at core, which is to decode human behavior. And, decode what moves people. Our mission statement right now is decode what moves people, because it's something we can use internally, embrace it. It's simple. People remember it, even though I didn't say it right the first time. And then we can bring it externally. When it comes to our core culture, we have a set of values, and it's an acronym called CORE, CORE, collaborative, objective, responsive, and earnest. And we have to collaborate as a team. We have to be very objective, as you heard me talk about, unbiased in our thinking and our decision-making. We have to be highly responsive to one another. People are like, why would we put that as a value? Because when you respond to people, you demonstrate you care. And then earnest, which is that special kind of caring. That is it. We have core values, we have core lore, we have core more. We talk about all the different things we do in our community, but it's all sort of resonates around core. But the other thing that most don't talk about is there's a difference between company values and individual values. And the great companies hire people that have great values. And you bring your values to work every day and you bring them home with you at the end of the day. So you have to end up to hire people with great values, and hopefully that intersects well with the company values. And then and that's how you build great teams. Even then, though, there are periods of uncertainty. Like I look at right now, and I think our culture is not what it needs to be for we have the first time in we've proven very good at building middle market companies, hundreds of millions of dollars of value, but maybe not billions, right? We might actually have a chance to do something that big, that special right now. We have to get our culture right. We're not quite there right now. And part of it is things that we can influence internally, in which we're working on. And part of it is like, man, it is an uncertain time. People are pissed off about AI. People don't want to embrace it. People don't want to necessarily learn at the pace we're asking them to learn, or learn at all. And what we're trying to convince people at the same time we're giving them a stick too is like, dude, you better embrace this, because whether it's here at Augeo or whatever the next leg of your journey is somewhere else, you're going to have these skills, right? And so we are, because of the uncertainty of AI, frankly, because of some political divisiveness in the world, people are not fully embracing it, and it creates uncertainty. People are nervous about their careers, their families, legitimately so. So we're trying to give them a path, certainly within our ecosystem, to learn, to grow as we grow. But it's still because of sort of the mega factors around AI and in the broader environment, what's going to happen to the economy, what's going to happen to certain jobs because of AI, et cetera. It's by definition a nervous time. So it's really hard to build great culture, great company when the wraparound is a very uncertain time. And we just to do the best we can to move through it.
There's several reflections I want to. There's one thing that, sometimes responsiveness you mentioned. And, sometimes people, over the years, one thing I learned is when I engage with successful entrepreneurs, they respond fast. So I respond fast to people. I'm not saying I'm a successful entrepreneur, but I respond fast. And it's a kind of and in Ride the Next Way, we respond fast. And it's also show, because I see lots of people, sometimes people says, how do you make a judgment call about this founder? And I said, I said, they respond you 4 days later about something, and and they make you feel like, they are so important in this world, like you're just a nuisance in their life. I said, you can't build a company like that. I mean, to me, it's like, this doesn't mean that, like, you need to respond everything quickly, but it's a muscle, and that works for me. I mean, when I engage with successful entrepreneurs, when I send them a message on even LinkedIn that they don't know me, they respond me 3 hours later, and then we have something set up. So that's the reason it's important in this world, like, how you respond and how quickly you respond, and because it's a kind of a red flag, green flag thing. And so if somebody's interested in you, you never know. Lots of people reach out to us on LinkedIn, and if you don't respond, and maybe you can lose an opportunity, you can lose a business, you can maybe lose the interest of an investor. You never know. So, if you are really serious about building things, please respond quickly. And so, that's my reflection. And my last question is, because sometimes people comes and ask me, so what is different with Ride the Next Wave? And, we call ourselves the unconsultants. I tell people, like, we don't have billable hours. I'm very generous with my time, and also we love our clients. And also we don't compete. Like, I compete, I'm very competitive with Ride the Next Wave. We are growing fast, but I don't have any obsession with competition. I'm friendly with everyone. I can open doors. It doesn't matter. But I believe in inherent honest kindness in life. And because this world is big enough, and, we don't need to be transactional, it's relationships. There are lots of money to be made. I prefer opening a door to my competitor than, like, slamming doors and turning into a totally a zero-sum game person, because it hurts me as a human being. And I know that that's something that can be a weird statement coming from a guy who, business school educations all over the time, but who gives a shit? And so my point is, kindness. One thing attracts me to you is not your success and stuff. You're a successful person, but I'm not a transactional asshole. That's the reason sometimes my father say, like, you constantly, you need to go be with the successful people and rich people and they will get you something. I don't. And I just, success is good. But when I engage with kind people and human people, relational founders and successful, that's my tribe. So tell us, or who wants to build companies, or all the entrepreneurs to be entrepreneurs out there, how can you build a kind business and stay as a human being, a kind human being simultaneously?
First of all, thank you for that. And kindness in its many definitions is core to who I am. And as I shared earlier, in terms of my dad, and so in how kind he was to people. And I think it manifests in a number of different ways, right? Just to be kind and give people the benefit of the doubt, because you want people to be good people. You look for the very best in people. And the fact is, it's not always that way. There are people who are genuinely, we've learned over the years, not kind. I dare say destructive at times, right? Nevertheless, I still want to give people the benefit of the doubt, because if not, it sours my soul, right? I don't want to be around. Now, you want to avoid, as I've gotten older, I try to avoid people that sour my soul, and you will get burned by giving people the benefit of the doubt. I will still take it the chin every day and give people the benefit of the doubt, even if it's a setback, because it is core to who I am, and I feel better about myself. I don't want to become one of those people. And so part of it is just like, it's good to be kind. Kind also has other sort of implications when you think about the different things that our organization does in our communities, that, volunteer leadership, we do a lot of philanthropy. It's just really important to engage in the communities that have supported us. I'm now, I don't feel this, but I'm 60 years old, right? I feel a lot younger. I will say that to get to be this far in my career and not give back is just wrong. Like, if we're going to work this hard and be able to build the kinds of businesses and the relationships that we are fully blessed to have in the communities that we support, we need to find a way to give back. We just simply do. And whether it's in the entrepreneurial ecosystem or through some of the other amazing work that, charitable organizations do across so many different facets of need, whether it's, food resources or in the world of social justice or whatever it might be. We have to find a way to participate and give back. Otherwise, what's the point of all this? So kindness it has many forms, and at the core of it is humility. And I think you also hit on that, Jihan, when just this notion that like I've always believed from my restaurant days, whether you're a bus person in a restaurant or the president of the United States, you treat people with the same level of respect, period. That means when it comes to responsiveness, whatever it might be, you don't ask for something that you don't give yourself, and then you just bring it every day and bring respect. It doesn't mean you don't have to run a business, and sometimes you don't have to make hard decisions, but you have to try to do it with authenticity, with a rationale and a level of compassion that many might not have. But kindness is just core to who I am, and I think who we are as an organization.
I will do one more last reflection, and I will give it to Shailesh. So sometimes I tell people, it's a joke. I tell people like, I'm not Minnesota nice, I'm Minnesota kind. I tell you things that you don't want to hear in a kind way, but I will be honest about it. And to me, it's like if somebody comes to me and asks about their business, I will be honest about it. And I have lots of honest conversation in our businesses. We sit down with people and tell them honestly and, in a kind way that, this is not working. We can work together this way. And it's kind. And one other thing is, like I said, this is not niceness. Kindness is a hardcore thing because like David said, Marcus Aurelius is always talks about it in his, meditations. Every day somebody come and backstab you one way or the other. It's part of the human nature. So we cannot change the human nature. What we can do is, it's our choice. And to say if somebody backstabs us, we learn something. But if that person in the future has a, opportunity to say sorry or, and need help, you can say, hey, I will help you. That's the kindness. But it takes lots of human effort. And so the kindness makes you a, more powerful human being. And I'm reflecting on this because I do lots of men's work with, one of our, Marcus company. And so being kind is a tough work. And so it's part of becoming a wise man and woman in life. So, Shailesh?
David, before we let you go, right? You are listening to your journey and how you joined the family, saved the business, built a whole new business off of that, and now you are a successful entrepreneur. We have a lot of viewers, right, who are probably in the same space as you were 30 plus years back. We have viewers who are trying to bring their ideas to life, right? They're struggling through it. What advice would you have for them?
It's a great question. I guess I would focus on the entrepreneurial journey and this idea of keeping your cupboard filled with ingredients, because when you're starting a business or in the early days of the business, when you have just you or you and a few people, it is hard and it is heavy lifting, and the skills and the ingredients you need to be successful to get the business to the next phase are different than when you build the business to $5 million of revenue or $10 million of revenue or $20 million of revenue. And if you talk to most private equity firms or VC firms, they will inevitably say that whoever the entrepreneur is that brought it from, $0 to 20 million to 100 million, it's almost never the same leadership team or the same CEO that can take it to the next level, right? And there are exceptions, of course, and we see that in the mega successes and the multi-billion-dollar companies today, but the many thousands of others don't ever get there, right? And so partly because the entrepreneur or the teams are not investing in learning, in growing, and understand what it means to lead a 10-person organization versus a 500-person organization or a 1,000-person organization or whatever it might be. And so I think it's this idea of keeping your cupboard filled with ingredients, being the chef of your own destiny, not recipe driven, right? And if you are the chef of your own destiny and truly a great entrepreneur, you're constantly learning. You're constantly understanding what ingredients you have, what ingredients you're missing. I need financing, I need marketing, I need meetings to sign my first client, whatever it might be. You have to be able to identify those objectively and understand what it means, understand the sort of the entrepreneurial progression and embrace it and lean into it. And then just, continue to be persistent, continue to battle, continue to bring it every day as best you can, and then not be bashful to reach out, not be bashful to reverse course. If you see something objectively that, man, this isn't sticking, my intuition is this isn't going to work, we better adjust course. And so it's some version of that, and again, it's not easy. And I give, I just look at like your business and there's a lot of discussion today around forward deployed engineers, right? And other organizations trying to learn how to use AI. Well, you guys have launched a platform that's effectively FDE, forward deployed engineers, or consulting, or some version of teaching organizations, middle market companies, how to use AI. I mean, that at the end of the day is on trend. It's on the wave, right? So the question is like, what does it take to continue to build that up, to win those clients, to stay in front? And you're doing it. It's amazing. But it's that idea of like, okay, and then what needs to be tweaked, what needs to be adjusted as you continue to grow that business? Because I look at the mega, from the McKinseys of the world to the OpenAIs, they're all launching, and a lot of private equity firms now launching their own forward deployed engineering teams, right? It's exactly what you're doing in the sort of the market sector that you're targeting. So it is a lot of just that, it's just showing up every day, sleeves rolled up, knowing that there's no magic to this stuff, and you just got to stay at it.
Yeah, I love what you said. So, which is there is no magic, right? Just keep pounding every day, keep learning, right? And there'll be better days at some point in time if you keep doing it, right? Exactly. So incredible wisdom for our viewers. Thank you, David, for coming here this morning. Love your story. Our viewers are going to learn so much from you. I love how you're taking, or we love how you're taking the AI first approach to actually reshaping the business, fundamentally actually coming up with new business models to get closer and closer to the organizations and their employees, because employees is their best assets, right? Whether they want to grow, pivot, do something, innovate. So thank you for taking the time. And we're excited to see what you do next.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. Really, really fun conversation. I don't get a chance to do this very often, and I really loved it all. So I really appreciate being here.
Thank you very much for being here first, man. I really appreciate you a lot, and you're gracious enough to accept the invite, and you showed up, and also whenever I send you emails, and you always quickly respond, and so because you're a successful entrepreneur. But one thing is, sometimes you engage with people, and even to our conversation, and then you feel like you become a better person. And I'm experiencing that right now. So this podcast is, Ride the Next Way podcast, but also today, me, Shailesh, and Carolyn we've all become a better version of ourselves because of you, David. And thank you very much for your humanity, your kindness, and your kind heart to share your story, experiences, and making an Augeo a humble place to for us to show up.
Thank you, David. That's incredible.